That pasta? Yeah. Can I have a bite of that? Yeah, you too. That's what it's It's already recording for. Yeah. Okay, press.
Okay.
I'm gonna start letting people in.
Yep.
We've only got 2 people so far.
I know 2 out of the 5 are being recorded later. Ready? Do we have all 3 or that's 2? All right, welcome everybody. I'm going to give us another couple minutes to make sure. I believe we have one more person joining us today, and the rest of the people are actually joining us later tonight with a post video. So anyway, I'm just give a couple minutes, and thank you again for joining us. Okay, everybody. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. My name is Danny Lledó. I'm chef and owner here at Chiquette, and thank you for joining us today on the cooking class via Zoom for Valencian Paella. Valencian Paella itself is the traditional one. I believe it was about 3 or 4 years ago they made the Valencian Paella with these specific ingredients, the official Valencian Paella, so you can't call on other paellas that don't have these exact ingredients Valencian paellas. It's a little confusing to a certain degree, but it's like, think about it as like champagne. You can't call sparkling brut from California champagne. You can say method champenoise. So you can say the paella is from the Valencia area, but you can't call paella Valencian paella without these specific ingredients. Also, interesting to know, it's the one that, this paella is the one that has the biggest competition done every year in Sueca, where it's actually the cradle of paella itself, which is about a couple miles south of the city of Valencia proper, in the lagoon where all the rice gets cultivated. So from that standpoint, this paella here is what I've been the one competing with over the last several years. Last September, the last time they had the competition, we didn't have it last year because of COVID. I actually got my first international award. So nonetheless, let's get started here today. I want to go over some ingredients here, make sure everybody's on par. We have here some chicken, some rabbit, green beans, lima beans. I have here tomato puree, garlic, I have broth, I have rice, I have olive oil. I do have here sweet paprika, and I do have here salt. In terms of utensils, I got here a tong. It works well for me, and I have my paella pan. If you don't have a paella pan at home, I recommend using any flat type of surface pan that can do an open flame. or electric stove, it doesn't really matter, but as long as it's flat on the bottom, you're not going to be covering it, and you have enough volume inside the pan to withstand all the ingredients without overflowing. Okay, so we're going to get started first here by turning the fire about our electric or gas stove at home about 60 to 70%. Let's put it on top here. Give it about 30 seconds. Get the pan warm. Add a little bit of olive oil. I'm doing a paella for one here. So it's about 25 milliliters of olive oil per person. And now I'm going to salt the pan. Salting the pan does a couple things here. Besides seasoning the ingredients, it'll make sure that the olive oil doesn't like jump at you when sauteing, as well as it helps with confront some of the burning of the pan through the cooking process. So first what we're going to do is add the chicken. Chicken gets added first. And we want to brown this chicken. I already seasoned the pan a little bit, so I'll always be careful with in terms of the amount of salt I use, but I'm going to make sure I like to add a little bit more. But add salt as you feel comfortable with, because then there's a moment of time where we can do a salt check, and there you can adjust your flavors and sure what your liking is and you're comfortable with. So all I'm doing here is sauteing the chicken first. And again, I'm doing a paella for one to give you a better idea at home. So the reason why you get this is around 60 to 70% of the highest heat. You don't necessarily want to start like splattering over the place, burning parts of the chicken versus other parts of the chicken not being cooked. So also, if you do it a good browning of this chicken, you'll be able to see some of the fat itself being slowly turned into oil, grease, which helps a lot with the flavor of the pan. And that's why we use the chicken first versus the rabbit. The rabbit is a leaner type of meat that has less fat on it, so it doesn't need it to happen first. The Valencian paella itself is a dish that started in terms of what the farmers used, using their ingredients that were readily available to them. So these are ingredients that are not necessarily expensive. It has to do with what was close to them, was available. It originally started, the first paella as a vegetable, and snails were the first types of paellas because those were inexpensive at all. And then obviously, depending on where you're from in the Valencian community, you had different ingredients. Some people put red peppers on some of this paella. Then you start to go towards Alicante province and city, we start seeing seafood paellas. I want to make sure I'm turning up my heat a little bit more. I don't lose strength here. You guys have it easy at home. You can just put it at 60, 70% and be okay with it. Okay. So as soon as I start seeing some browning, I feel the chicken is probably cooked maybe about 90%, but I'm still haven't finished cooking it. I'm going to start adding the rabbit. And I still have it at 60, 70% of high heat. Let's season the rabbit a little bit. Move it around a little bit, make sure it doesn't stick. although a little bit of the browning on the pan from the actual meat product, it actually helps, develop flavor in terms of the broth. If you can believe it, you guys have chicken broth at home that I provided with this paella. But in competition, you don't use chicken broth, you actually use water. And so you actually have to get the flavors of the paella into the rice through the product itself. So doing these steps properly with water actually gets you the same flavor than chicken broth. But it really takes time to develop that technique and the understanding on how to do it. So make sure that you guys have a delicious paella today. Make sure that we avoid that level of detail and perfection, and we make sure you have a great paella. So right here, it starts saying all the products being cooked here nicely. And now I'm going to add the green beans. In Valencia, you use these products called Romano beans or runner beans. Sometimes those products not easily as available or seasonal here in the States, but a perfectly acceptable substitute is green bean. Season just slightly green beans here. And we want on the green beans to like really saute it about 25% here. And the next step here, add the tomato, the garlic. It's about a tablespoon of tomato puree per person, about a clove of garlic per person, and about a half a tablespoon of sweet paprika per person. And we start cooking it all together. Cook the tomato down, infuse the ingredients together. Now I'm going to add the white beans. And now I'm going to start adding the broth here. So we do a 3-to-1 ratio. We're using bumba rice, which is the rice that's harder to overcook. Which, for people not knowing the different strengths of the paella, it's a great one to use starting because, you want to be overcooking the rice. We want to make sure we get an al dente, which is a hairline fracture of like whiteness inside of the grain of the rice. And you can cut it open to make sure that that's where you are and that's where you have perfection of a paella. Now I'm going to go get my saffron here. And I'm going to be bringing this to the highest heat possible. Now for the saffron, about a good measure is about 5 to 6 threads per person. A little bit of saffron goes a long way, which is about like 1/4 of a gram. I make sure I use my fingers here, crumble it up. That way the flavors are more easily penetrable inside the pan and the broth. Add it. And I mix it all in really well together. And now I'm going to bring it to high heat, which is going to take a little bit more wood for me. And at this time, I would like to do a quick recap of all the steps I've done up to this moment. Okay, At this juncture, the only three things that we need to make sure that we have that's not inside of the paella pan is the rice. We have still salt here that we do a salt check. And if you have it at home, you know, a little bit of rosemary, whether it's dry or fresh, can be a nice little add-on to the paella flavor, okay? So the steps that I got to this point are the following. So I first, you know, put the pan on top of the fire, or gas stove or electric, about 60 to 7% of high heat. Add about 25 milliliters of olive oil per person into the pan. Then I added the chicken. I sauteed the pan, season it, make sure we add a decent amount of salt to make sure the olive oil doesn't like jump in our faces. Saute the chicken about 80 to 90%, get a little browning. Then we get the rabbit. Then brown that piece of meat. We follow that with the green beans. Sauteed it about 25%, and then we added the sofrito. The sofrito are the following three ingredients, which are different from other parts of Spain and other parts of Latin America. We do not use onion. All we use is tomato puree, about a tablespoon per person of a fresh tomato. We use a clove pureed down, and about per person. And then we also have a half a tablespoon of sweet paprika. After we cooked that there, we added the lima bean. After that, we added the broth, a 3-to-1 ratio in terms of broth to rice. And now, and we added the saffron. And now we're bringing this to high heat. Now this is a really good boil here. I'll make sure it's a little bit more even on my side. All right. Okay. And now that we have it at high heat, we're gonna add the rice in. And as soon as we add the rice, we want to make sure the rice goes down to the bottom of the paella pan, like if it was the sand on the bottom of the ocean. So we spread it out. We don't necessarily stir. We're not trying to make a risotto and break down and create more starch into the broth. We really just want to move things around so it's nice and symmetrical, so it cooks evenly. We're not covering this, so we really want to make sure that is as even as possible being on the pan. And so I spread the chicken. Sometimes I even lift the chicken, make sure that, you know, there's no rice that's on top. You know, say if a rice is sitting on top, like right here, we say bad rice, go back to the bottom. And all right, so we got this, we added the rice. So now we have an 18-minute cooking process, okay? On this 18-minute cooking process, we want 10 minutes on high heat. We have 8 minutes as a simmer. Last moment, about 30 seconds to a minute, we can bring that heat back up to create the caramelization on the bottom of the paella pan. And what we call sacrat, which is for Valencians, our caviar. Okay. At this moment, after we add the rice in, here is your salt test. So you go ahead and take a spoon, taste it, and it should be slightly salted, like chicken broth. So this is like your grandma's chicken soup or your matzo ball soup, whatever it is. I would want it to be slightly salted. Why slightly salted? Because, you know, we want the rice absorbs the salt and creates a perfectly seasoned rice. So it shouldn't be too salty, but it should be slightly outside of your comfort zone because you're not having soup. If it was soup, it'd be different. But at the same time, we have rice, so it absorbs the salt, and therefore we want to make it slightly salted. I have already measured in terms of how much salt it is, and I have a good amount of experience, so I know I'm okay on my salt level. But for those of you who are not familiar in terms of like what that, please take a spoon and taste. And so here we have it. We're cooking this. This should be about 10 minutes on high heat and 8 minutes on the simmer. At this point too, I want to go over a couple things in terms of types of beverages that will do well with this paella. I think this is a very friendly paella to a lot of types of beverage accompaniments, good pairings. I like personally beer. I like sparkling, champagne, cava, All these things are really cut through all the flavors, and we're going to make a really pleasurable pairing experience. Also, if you want to do white wine and red wine or rosé wine, those are also great pairings. On this type of paella, I would, for if you do choose to do a red wine, unless you just want to have a bottle of Cabernet, because that's what you want to drink that evening. The more pairings are more appropriate from a pairing perspective is going to be like a Pinot Noir, a Tempranillo, or even a Barbera in terms of an Grenache, in terms of medium body type of wine to not be too overpowering. Rosés are great to cut through the flavor. If you were to choose a white wine on this type of paella, I wouldn't mind having a white wine that has a little bit more body to it, like a Chardonnay, or like an oak type of Sauvignon Blanc would be really nice to go with it as well. So right here, I'm not stirring, I'm just making sure I'm placing, make sure everything comes out even here. Symmetry is an important aspect when it comes to paella because you have to think about it, you have different paella sizes. So if you have a family of 8, you might have a paella size that's about 3 to 4 feet. Okay, so you eat from the paella pan as in terms of the tradition. You want to make things, that the person next to you, the person across from you, has the same access to all the ingredients. So you want to make sure that that person has chicken, that person has rabbit, that person has, green beans and stuff like that. And it's so symmetry is not just for eye filling purposes, but also has a functional purpose of when you come together at the table as a family and eat from the paella pan. Here, starting to see a nice little simmer here. I'm going to bring it up a little bit more. As soon as you start seeing on the rice like this, it's a good sign. The rice is absorbing the broth. We're getting close to about, minute number 11 or 12. You have to understand that different kitchens, different stove tops are going to, how much rice you're doing it, how many people you're serving for is going to alter how much you're actually, how fast you go in terms of this cooking process and stuff like that. So you are going to need to adjust. And therefore, if you are at 10 minutes at high heat and you start seeing there's almost no broth, slow it down. Bring it to like 25%, even a slower simmer. If it's not going fast enough for you, you have too much broth, you're not seeing rice at minute like 10, then I would keep it on high. But just make sure that you slow it down, especially in the last 4 or 6 minutes, because that's when you start seeing the speed of where the cooking process and the absorption of the rice gets a lot faster during those times when you have less to consume, obviously. You can shake the pan here, start seeing a little bit more, make sure everything is a little symmetrical here. Do it, you can lift up the chicken here. You can start seeing, make sure that everything starts cooking a little bit more properly. I make sure that the product's on top. Okay. So I definitely want to make sure I have a nice simmer at this juncture. Also, something that's very natural at this stage, I start just like at home, here it also happens, and where maybe your paella and your stovetop or electric will be a little uneven. So up here, I'm already starting to see it dry, a little bit more dry, so I just flip it over like that. So even at this point, it still has a little bit more to go. So nice little simmer here. For those of you that are eating right now and want to try us out for dinner or dinner next week, Restaurant Week does continue at our sister restaurant downstairs, Indoor Dining. For Chiquette, we are offering Restaurant Week menus to go. It's also available, but because of capacity limitations, indoor dining at Chiquette is being reserved for a la carte and tasting menu, which is a fabulous time with fantastic service and a great product here for you to try. Not just paella. 80% of our customers do try the tasting menu, and they leave extremely happy, and it's an experience worth trying. Here we have, again, the slow simmer. A lot of people would remove the paella at this juncture, but it actually has a couple more minutes left of observation of that broth. We want to make sure it's dry, not wet. If you were making a caldoso or meloso, which is like a brothy or a soupy type of rice dish, which are very common, especially during the wintertime in the Valencian community, sure, you can make sure you have a little bit more broth, and then you adjust in terms of make sure what you're looking for. Here we're looking for a dry rice, so we want to make sure all the liquid gets absorbed. We want to make sure that also we're not burning anything, so I'm being a little bit careful. At this juncture, based on what I see, here is where you would want to like increase the high heat over the last 30 seconds to create that caramelization on the bottom of the pan. We start seeing that browniness on the outside. That's a good sign. We still have a little bit more to go. So I'm gonna add my little cheat sheet. Don't try this at home because I'm assuming you guys don't have a wood stove. So I'm gonna increase here the last 30 seconds as a little rapid fire for the caramelization. And at this juncture, we add the rosemary, give the paella a nice little aroma. You can sprinkle, if you had dry rosemary, that's fine. Sprinkle a little bit on top, not too much. And we got here a nice dry rice. We're gonna take it and remove it. Or you can turn your stove top off. I'm removing it here. And here we have our Valencian paella. And usually I would want to, even here at the restaurant, especially coming out really hot off of the wood fire, we want to let it repose. Remember, this is a Spanish dish. It's a little lazy. It needs a little siesta before we go back to eat it in terms of like absorbing all the flavors. So at this juncture, you guys been a little quiet today. Open it up for questions.
Hey, this is Clyde. How you doing?
Good, and yourself?
Good. Now, if I want to do seafood, do I saute it off first, remove it, and then put it back in during the cooking time, not to overcook the seafood?
So when I do seafood, especially prawns, shrimp that have the shell on, I would cook it at 50% and then remove it so it doesn't like out of the pan, and then add it in at the very end during minute 14 to 16 during the cooking process of the rice, and then put it back on top. And therefore, you ensure that those type of seafood products, the shrimp and the prawns, don't get overcooked. The calamari can withstand the actual cooking and the whole process of the rice, so that's something that you can leave in. Fish, I would remove immediately after you cook it, 50% as well.
And put in for about the last minute.
The last couple of minutes, yeah.
Okay. Now, what about clams?
Warming it up.
Right. Clams? Now, what about clams? Do you just do that separately and then put it in at the end?
I apologize. Clyde, would you please repeat?
What about clams? Do you cook the clams separately and then put it in at the end?
I would, especially at home, to ensure the clams open up. You know, at the restaurant, if you do it at the right moment, so I would do it a minute. I would start putting the clams in at minute 14. I would make sure I would wash
Right,
the clams first.
right. Okay, thanks.
You're very welcome.
Hey there, this is Kevin. Thanks so much. This was really a delightful lesson.
Well,
My
you're
question
very
is,
welcome.
oftentimes I'll do this on the grill outside because I don't have a wood stove.
Okay.
What do you recommend in terms of types of wood that work best for this paella?
So, interesting enough, here at the restaurant, we use four types of wood, depending on what we're cooking. On the grill, we use apple wood, especially when we use pork products. The paella, we use a little bit more traditional, the orange wood. But these things are very specialized and hard to get to. Any type of hardwood are the appropriate types of wood when it comes to paella. We don't want a softwood that it goes away too quickly. A hardwood, something that withstands. So a maple, a hickory, apple woods, those are all good examples. I would stay away from pine, especially if it's not dry appropriately. It can create a lot of issues, even though it might smell okay. Cherry, cedar, all great other hardwoods. This here is different. The biggest difference in terms of cooking a paella versus cooking a steak is a steak you want, you cook it over hot coals. You know, you don't want to have the open flame to start burning the meat. The reverse is here when it comes down to the paella. You want a flame. You want cooking. You're cooking a metal pot that you want to boil rice and the ingredients. The amount of strength that's needed, hardwood is the best type of wood to do with this.
And are you using apple wood today or orange wood today?
I use a very combination. If I use orange wood because we're not in Florida, I would go broke. So I have to have a ship from. Actually, I get mine shipped from Colorado. They actually come from orange trees in California. So I buy it a little bit at a time. So I do a good mixture. So like here at the restaurant, I have a delivery service that provides me cedar with hickory, and sometimes it mixes in with a little bit of apple wood. But then I put in my own orange wood to help use the flavor in terms, and they often more of the flavor. So I use wood here is really adding a different ingredient to the food, a different flavor profile. So that orange wood, it's other types of fruit woods do give that extra flavor profile to your whatever you're cooking. I mean, there's no secret that, you know, it was not created yesterday. Applewood bacon and applewood is a great combination. So if you think about it like that, you think about how long that's been around, how awesome that is. You also hear hickory. I mean, these are all flavors that people have already trusted in adding to a good meat product. So when it comes down to the paella, a good fruit wood would be the hardwood would be the most appropriate type.
Awesome, thanks.
You're very welcome. All right, then. Well, thank you so much for joining today, and look forward to, we have a couple other classes coming out in February. One, I believe, next week, and one 2 weeks after that. So, you know, please stay tuned. I'm sure you guys will sign up to my emails or keep looking at or where you purchased this class on Talk, and we'll continue updating and adding classes during this pandemic, which is a good way of experiencing us and me and have us cooking together and having a good time. So thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.